In front of 42 naval officers, my brother called me a relic from a war we'd already moved past. The room laughed. They thought he was making a joke about outdated tactics, the kind of gentle ribbing that happens when family members cross paths in uniform. I smiled, just once. Because I knew three things they didn't. I owned 22% of the company that made their aircraft. His career existed because of a lie I'd kept silent about for 8 years. And that laugh was about to cost him everything. The Naval Special Warfare Center conference room smelled of coffee and salt air that October morning. San Diego sunshine cut through the windows at angles that made everyone's shoulder boards gleam. I stood at the podium in my khaki uniform, silver oak leaves at my collar, presenting advanced combat aviation tactics for special warfare support. 20 slides into the deck, my voice steady and professional, explaining threat assessment protocols that had kept helicopters airborne in conditions that grounded entire fleets. Rear Admiral Trevor Castellano sat in the front row, arms crossed, that smirk I'd known since childhood playing at the corner of his mouth. His wife Bethany perched beside him in a coral dress that cost more than most junior officers made in a month, diamond bracelet catching light every time she shifted in her seat. Trevor's hand rose, cutting through my explanation of rotor degradation in sandstorm environments. Commander, with all respect to your historical experience, haven't modern systems made individual pilot heroics obsolete? We're in the age of drones now. The room tittered. Historical. The word landed like a slap wrapped in velvet. I paused, cursor hovering over the slide advance button. Looked at him steadily. That face so much like mine around the eyes, so different in every way that mattered. Admiral, individual judgment still matters when technology fails. As you learned in the Katchmak Gulf incident, silence dropped like a curtain. Officers who'd been scrolling phones suddenly went still. Trevor's face flashed something raw and furious before the mask slammed back down, professional smile stretching across clenched teeth. Let's stick to the curriculum, Commander. The presentation continued. My voice didn't shake. It never did. 22 years of flying through gunfire teaches control that goes bone deep, the kind you can't fake and can't break. But inside, behind the steady cadence and laser pointer precision, I felt the old wound open, the one that never quite healed no matter how many missions I flew, how many lives I saved, how many medals they pinned to my chest. The wound of being Trevor Castellano's older sister, in a family that valued sons over sense, charm over competence, potential over proof. After the session ended, officers filed out with polite nods and careful distance. Trevor approached with Bethany gliding at his elbow, her perfume arriving 3 seconds before she did. "Di, that was unnecessary," the Katchmak reference. "You asked a question?" I answered. Bethany's hand landed on my forearm, warm and weighted with intent. Her nails were perfect ovals painted the same coral as her dress. "Trevor just wants to make sure you're okay. You've been alone since Richard passed. 5 years is a long time. Have you thought about retirement? Enjoying life?" The word alone sat between us like a diagnosis. Alone. As if solitude were a symptom rather than a choice. As if the absence of a man in my house meant the absence of a life worth living. I looked at Bethany's hand on my arm, then at her face, reading the calculation behind the concern. "I'm quite content, Bethany. But thank you for asking." Trevor shifted his weight, 6'2" of pressed uniform and barely contained irritation. "We're just saying, Di. You've given a lot. Maybe it's time to think about yourself. What comes next?" What comes next is tomorrow's briefing on rotary wing asset allocation. Was there something specific you needed, Trevor? His jaw tightened. Bethany's smile never wavered, but her finger slipped from my arm. "Just checking in, sis. Family does that." They walked away, and I gathered my laptop and notes with hands that showed no tremor. Outside the windows, helicopters thundered across the tarmac in formation, their shadows racing across concrete like omens I'd learned to read, but not always understand. February 2017, Adak Naval Air Station, Aleutian Islands, Alaska. The kind of cold that turns breath to ice before it leaves your lungs. I was 33, senior combat helicopter pilot, 7 years into a career that had taken me from training flights over Pensacola beaches to combat zones where the sky came alive with tracer fire and the radio crackled with voices that didn't always make it home. Call sign Valkyrie 6. The Norse chooser of the slain, except I specialized in bringing the dead back to life, pulling bodies out of situations the manual said were unsurvivable. The briefing room reeked of wet wool and desperation. SEAL team trapped 40 miles northeast. Whiteout conditions, injured personnel, communication failing. The weather officer, a kid barely old enough to drink legally, pointed at the satellite image with a hand that shook slightly. "Commander, this storm is category extreme. Visibility 0, winds 95 knots. I recommend we wait for conditions to improve." I studied the radar, watching the white mass spiral and pulse like something alive. The numbers scrolled across the screen in red, temperature dropping, wind accelerating. Every minute we waited was a minute those men died slower. "If we wait, they freeze. I'm going." My co-pilot, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, looked up from her pre-flight checklist. She was 26, brilliant, terrified. "The manual says this is outside operational parameters, ma'am." "The manual doesn't account for men dying in snow. Strap in." The flight existed in memory as a series of white-knuckled moments strung together on adrenaline and mathematics. Pure white surrounding the cockpit glass, visibility measured in feet when I could measure it at all. Instruments failing one by one as ice built up on sensors, and the airframe shuddered under a wind that hit like fists. I flew by instinct and the reflection of moonlight on ice, because that was the one thing that didn't lie. The world reduced to stick pressure and pedal adjustment, making micro-corrections every half second, holding the aircraft level through sheer force of will, translated through hydraulics that screamed in protest. Tracer fire tore through the white at irregular intervals. Someone down there didn't want us extracting those seals, and they had the sense to shoot at the sound of rotors rather than wait for a visual they'd never get. Rounds punched through the tail section. Martinez gasped but held her position, hands steady on the backup controls. "We're hit. Hydraulics showing pressure loss." "I know, stay with me." 40 minutes in, the GPS died. Radio reduced to static. I followed the terrain by feel, reading the way wind currents shifted over ridges and valleys, trusting the map I'd memorized and the mission brief I'd studied until I could recite grid coordinates in my sleep. And then, through the chaos of snow and wind, movement, men waving from a crater of ice, forms barely distinguishable from the landscape. The landing happened in the space between one heartbeat and the next. No instruments, no guidance, just the pressure of wind on the airframe and the certainty that this was the only chance they had. Skids kissed ice. The ramp dropped. Martinez shouted coordinates I couldn't hear over the rotor wash and screaming wind. Men staggered up the ramp, 12 of them, hypothermic and bleeding, dragging wounded comrades whose names I wouldn't learn until the medal ceremony 3 months later. The last one through was a captain, face a mask of frostbite and exhaustion, eyes locked on mine with something that looked like disbelief. "You came." "Always." His name, I learned later, was Marcus Reeves. The man unconscious across his shoulders, limp and gray from blood loss, was his younger brother Cole. Lieutenant Cole Reeves, 29 years old, who'd wanted to be a teacher after his enlistment ended, who had a fiancée named Jennifer waiting in Seattle, and a future that stretched bright and certain beyond the war. On the return flight, the starboard engine exploded. Metal shrieked. The aircraft yawed hard right. I fought the stick, muscles burning, feet braced against pedals that wanted to spin us into a death spiral. Martinez worked the emergency procedures without being told, fingers flying across controls, voice steady as she called out airspeed and altitude. "We're not going to make it, ma'am." "Yes, we are. Lock your harness." The airfield lights appeared through the snow like a miracle I didn't believe in, but flew toward anyway. Single-engine landing, the aircraft screaming its protest, metal grinding metal as systems failed in cascade. We hit the runway hard enough to crack teeth, skidded 300 yards, rotors still spinning as I killed the engine, and the world went suddenly impossibly quiet. Medics swarmed the aircraft. 12 men carried off on stretchers, all 12 alive. Marcus Reeves turned before they loaded him into the ambulance, raised one hand in salute that I returned from the cockpit, still strapped into a seat wet with hydraulic fluid and my own cold sweat. The base commander wanted to write me up for reckless endangerment, violation of weather minimums, unauthorized deviation from approved flight corridors, destruction of a $40 million aircraft. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Officers in pressed uniforms asking questions about judgment and protocol, while I sat with my hands folded and answered in single sentences that gave them nothing to grab onto. 12 men are alive. That's the only metric that matters. They gave me the Navy Cross instead, below the Medal of Honor, above the Silver Star. The citation praised tactical excellence and uncommon valor. What it didn't mention was the way my hands shook for 3 days afterward, or how I woke screaming from dreams where the ice swallowed us whole, and I brought home 12 frozen corpses instead of living men. They called me Valkyrie 6 after that mission, the chooser of the worthy dead, except I chose life. Every mission, every flight, every impossible decision in the space between heartbeats. I chose to bring them home. November 2024. My house in San Diego, modest 3-bedroom in a neighborhood where military families mixed with civilians who didn't know what the ribbons on my chest meant and didn't ask. The mail came with catalogs and bills and a thick cream envelope with a law firm's return address embossed in gold. Estate of Catherine Margaret Castellano, deceased 2019. I stared at my mother's name, feeling the old complicated knot of grief and relief that came with orphanhood achieved in middle age. 5 years since the funeral, where Trevor gave the eulogy, and I sat in the back row in dress blues, dry-eyed, wondering if I'd ever cried for her, or if I'd used up all my tears by the time I was 12, and learned that her love came with conditions I could never quite meet. The letter detailed assets, the house in Virginia she'd left to the Historical Society, the car donated, the jewelry divided between grandchildren she'd barely known, and then the trust. $4.2 million, split equally between Diana Marie Castellano and Trevor James Castellano upon Diana's retirement from military service, or attainment of age 50, whichever occurred first. $2.1 million, split down the middle, perfect equality in death if never in life. I set the letter on the kitchen counter and stared out at the backyard where November light slanted gold across brown grass. Trevor thought that was the family fortune. He thought $2 million was the sum total of what I had, what I'd built, what I was worth in dollar terms that could be divided and distributed and fought over. He didn't know about the other $68 million. 2008. I was 26, junior pilot, combat deployments in Iraq, leaving me with experience that aged me faster than years. During downtime between missions, I worked on a problem that had killed 3 pilots in my squadron. Rotor instability during high-altitude dust storms, the way sand got into mechanisms and turned precision machinery into shrapnel waiting to happen. I developed a solution. Proprietary helicopter stabilization system, combination of software and hardware modifications that filtered inputs and adjusted in real time. Sketched it out in notebooks between flights, refined it during the long nights when sleep wouldn't come, and the dead visited in dreams. 2010, patent granted. A defense contractor saw the specification, sent a man in a suit to my barracks with an offer. License the technology, take a flat fee, $200,000 that seemed like lottery winner money to a captain making $63,000 a year. I said no, negotiated equity instead. 22% stake in the subsidiary they created to develop and market my design. They thought I was crazy, a pilot trying to play venture capitalist. Signed the papers anyway because the technology was good enough to be worth the gamble. 2015. The company went public, Apex Aviation Systems, specializing in defense contractor solutions for rotary wing aircraft. My 22% stake acquired for exactly $0 and a willingness to bet on myself, worth $8 million the day the stock started trading. I sold half, diversified into index funds and real estate, let the other half ride. 2024. Apex valued at $3.2 billion. My remaining 11% worth $704 million on paper, though I'd been systematically selling and diversifying for years. Current net worth, liquid assets plus holdings, $68 million. I'd earned it through brilliance in patents and taking risks that men in suits thought were too aggressive for a woman in uniform. Built it quietly, never talking about money in the officer's mess, never letting anyone know that the modest captain living in base housing and driving a 10-year-old Honda had a portfolio that made her wealthier than most of her commanders. Why the secret? Multiple reasons, stacked like armor plating. Didn't want military colleagues treating me differently, questioning whether I needed the job or took it seriously. Wanted promotions based on merit, not money. Kept family at arm's length after watching my mother's love twist into favoritism that praised Trevor for mediocrity while holding me to standards I could meet but never exceed. Used the wealth quietly. Funded Olivia's Naval Academy through a scholarship I'd secretly endowed. Veteran charities that kept my name off donor lists. Investments in programs that helped retired service members transition to civilian life. And most of all, I kept quiet because I'd learned early that my value to the Castellano family was in being invisible, in not threatening Trevor's ego, not outshining the golden sun, not taking up space that belonged by birthright to the boy child my mother had wanted first and loved best. Silence became strategy. Invisibility became armor. I didn't know yet that it would almost destroy me. Captain Marcus Reeves appeared at my office door on a Wednesday evening in late November, 8 years after I'd pulled him and his brother out of that Alaskan hellscape. He was 55 now, weathered and solid, teaching at the Naval Special Warfare Center after a career that had taken him to every combat zone where America put boots on ground. "Commander, I need to tell you something. It's about your brother." I gestured him inside, closed the door, felt the air pressure change as whatever he carried settled into the small space between desk and filing cabinet. Marcus placed a folder on my desk, plain manila, no markings, the kind of envelope that held secrets too sensitive for official channels. "This is the incident report from Katchmak Gulf, Alaska, February 2017. 6 months after you pulled us out of that storm." I opened it, read the mission brief, the personnel roster, the outcome summary that used clinical language to describe catastrophe. Helicopter crash. Lieutenant Cole Reeves killed. 4 others injured. Mechanical failure, the report concluded. Unpredictable, unavoidable, no command negligence. But attached to the back, paper clipped with the kind of care that suggested someone wanted it found eventually, was a different document. Maintenance logs showing the helicopter flagged for repair. Authorization to fly anyway, signed by the officer in temporary command. And then, the name that made my stomach drop, Lieutenant Trevor Castellano. "Your brother signed off on a bird he knew was damaged. My brother died because Trevor wanted to prove himself, wanted a successful mission on his record. Didn't want to be the officer who called abort." I forced myself to keep reading, found the transcript of the mission recorder audio, the backup that survived when the primary burned in the crash. Cole Reeves requesting permission to land, citing hydraulic warnings. Trevor refusing, voice sharp with impatience. "I'm not asking for a debate, Lieutenant. I'm telling you to fly." And then, the last words before impact, Trevor's voice edged with something ugly. "Stop being a pussy. Your sister flies through worse." He invoked you. Marcus's voice cracked. "Even as he killed Cole, he compared him to you. Like if my brother was brave like Diana Castellano, he'd have survived Trevor's incompetence." I sat very still, reading the words again, feeling them carve grooves into memory that would never smooth. Trevor had gotten a man killed through negligence and covered it up, built his career on a lie and a dead seal's grave, spent 8 years climbing ranks while Cole Reeves stayed 29 forever, buried in Arlington with full honors and a family that never knew the truth. "Marcus, why tell me now?" "Because your brother's been asking questions about you. About your finances. About Olivia's tuition. He came to me last month acting concerned, saying DA seems stressed. Does she have money problems? Do I know anything about her situation? I thought you should know he's hunting." Outside the window, evening fell across San Diego in shades of gold and purple. Somewhere in the city, Trevor walked around in a uniform decorated with ribbons he'd earned through competence he didn't possess, building a career on the foundation of a secret I'd unknowingly helped him keep by never asking the right questions. "Thank you for this. I don't know what I'll do with it yet, but thank you." Marcus stood, moved toward the door, turned back with the kind of expression that comes from carrying dead brothers through snow. "Commander, I kept quiet for 8 years because I didn't want to put my family through a trial. Didn't want Cole's death examined and re-examined in public. But if Trevor tries to hurt you, I won't stay quiet anymore. You pulled us out of hell. I owe you that much. Nanand. I hired a private investigator within the week. Former Navy intelligence, woman named Rachel Chen, who worked quietly and billed by results rather than hours. 2 weeks later, she delivered a report that laid out Trevor's life in spreadsheets and surveillance photos. Gambling debts, $890,000. Offshore accounts, Vegas casinos, illegal sports betting operations that accepted wire transfers and asked no questions. Credit cards maxed to $240,000, loans against his military pension that wouldn't finish paying off until he was 70. Bethany's shopping addiction adding another $180,000 in store credit and personal loans from friends who'd stopped being friends. Total debt, $1.31 million, more than half of what Trevor expected from our mother's estate, and that assumed I retired within the next 8 years to trigger the distribution. Rachel's surveillance turned up meetings with lawyers, shady ones who advertised on bus benches and kept offices in strip malls, the kind who'd file any paperwork if the check cleared. Notes from one meeting, obtained through methods Rachel didn't explain and I didn't ask about, laid out a strategy, establish Diana's mental incompetency, file for conservatorship, gain legal control of her assets and decision-making. They think you have 15 to 20 million hidden in patents and investments. They underestimated by 48 million, but they're not completely wrong about the general picture. Rachel showed me text messages between Trevor and Bethany, obtained from Bethany's iCloud through a password she'd reused on too many accounts. The messages read like a hunting manual. Trevor, Di doesn't even know what she's sitting on. Those patents are worth millions. Bethany, she's too damaged from combat to manage properly. We'd be doing her a favor. Trevor, just need to establish pattern, isolation, reckless behavior, PTSD. Bethany, already talking to people at her command, planting seeds. I read the messages twice, feeling something cold and methodical settle behind my ribs. They were planning to rob me by declaring me incompetent, using my service, my trauma, my sacrifice as weapons to prove I couldn't be trusted with the wealth I'd earned through that same service. What do you want to do? Rachel asked. I want documentation. Every meeting, every conversation, every lie. I want to know how far they'll go. And then I'll decide whether to teach my brother a lesson or destroy him completely. And the Naval Special Warfare Center Holiday Gala in December brought out dress uniforms and spouses, 200 people filling a ballroom with the kind of forced festivity that military events specialize in. I attended alone. Olivia was home from the Naval Academy for winter break, but chose to stay with friends rather than watch her mother make small talk with strangers. Trevor gave a speech as deputy commander, standing at the podium with the kind of easy charisma our mother had loved in him and never found in me. He talked about service and sacrifice, about honoring those who came before while making space for those who came next. And then his eyes found me across the room. We especially honor those who served with distinction. And we also recognize when it's time for our warriors to rest. My sister, Commander Diana Castellano, flew missions that made her a legend. But legends belong in history books, not cockpits. At some point, we have to let the next generation lead. Applause rippled through the room. Eyes turned toward me, sympathetic and patronizing in equal measure, looking at the middle-aged woman in uniform like she was a museum piece that should be retired to a shelf. I smiled, nodded, refused to let them see the fury that burned white-hot behind my sternum. Bethany materialized afterward with champagne and concern, voice pitched loud enough for nearby conversations to pause and listen. Diana, honey, Trevor and I have been talking. You've given so much. Maybe it's time to think about yourself. Do you even have a retirement plan? We could help you figure it out. Lieutenant Sophia Chen stood 10 feet away, young pilot trainee, 28 years old, with her whole career stretching ahead, uncertain and bright. She watched the interaction with eyes that saw more than Bethany probably intended. I appreciate the concern, Bethany, but I'm quite capable of managing my own future. Trevor joined us, arms sliding around my shoulders in a gesture that looked fraternal and felt like a collar. Di, don't be stubborn. You've been alone too long. Let family help. Admiral Raymond Shaw approached. Trevor's commanding officer, 62, and sharp as the creases in his uniform. Commander Castellano, I hear you're considering retirement? I haven't made that decision, sir. Well, whenever you do, we'll make sure you're taken care of. Your brother's been saying you deserve a comfortable exit. The pieces clicked into place. Trevor had been working my chain of command, planting suggestions that I was ready to quit, possibly unstable, definitely in need of the kind of intervention that caring families provided. Building the narrative that would support conservatorship papers when he filed them. I thanked the Admiral, extricated myself from Trevor's arm, walked outside to where December air carried the scent of eucalyptus and the distant sound of surf, pulled out my phone and texted Rachel Chen one word: everything. She'd know what I meant. Document it all. Every conversation, every manipulation, every step in Trevor's campaign to paint me as incompetent while positioning himself as the concerned brother. Build the case that would let me prove what he was before he could prove what I wasn't. And Olivia called the week before Christmas, voice small in a way that reminded me she was 19, not 30. Still young enough to be wounded by family in ways that wouldn't scar until later. Mom, can we talk about money? My hand tightened on the phone. What about it? Uncle Trevor said you're struggling to pay my tuition, that you took out loans. He offered to help, but I said no, I'd just get a part-time job or something. The lie landed with precision that took my breath. Trevor knew I'd never tell Olivia about my wealth, never burden her with secrets that could complicate her military career or change how people treated her at the academy. He'd weaponized my silence, turned my discretion into evidence of poverty. Olivia, who told you I'm struggling? Uncle Trevor and Aunt Bethany. They said you're too proud to ask for help, but they can see you're stressed. They showed me an article about military retirement benefits and said you're not getting enough. I forced my voice steady, keeping fury out of the tone she'd hear through the phone. Olivia, I need you to listen to me carefully. I am not struggling financially. Your tuition is fully covered. I have not taken any loans. Do you understand? Ooh. Silence on the other end. Confusion thick enough to feel through the connection. But Uncle Trevor said, your uncle is lying to you. I don't know exactly why yet, but he is. Mom, that doesn't make sense. Why would he lie? He's family. He's trying to help. And there it was, the manipulation complete. Trevor had isolated me from my own daughter, made her question my competence, turned her into an ally who'd testify about Mom's financial stress if it came to that. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? A long pause, then quietly, I guess. We hung up with promises to talk more at Christmas, hollow assurances that everything was fine. I sat in my kitchen as evening light died across the backyard and realized Trevor had moved beyond theft. He was dismantling my life piece by piece, taking my reputation, my daughter's trust, my peace of mind, everything that couldn't be measured in dollars but mattered infinitely more. The legal notice arrived on a Tuesday in January. Petition for conservatorship, Diana Marie Castellano, filed by Trevor James Castellano and Bethany Ann Castellano. The grounds read like character assassination dressed in legal language. Respondent exhibits signs of PTSD, social isolation, impaired judgment. Respondent has significant assets requiring professional management. Respondent's military service has resulted in cognitive decline affecting financial decision-making. They'd attached medical records I'd never authorized released, therapy sessions from post-deployment counseling that were supposed to be confidential, testimonies from colleagues I barely knew, claiming concern about my withdrawn behavior and questionable choices. Financial analysis arguing I didn't understand my own patent royalties, couldn't manage the complexity of my portfolio, needed professional oversight. Photos showed me alone, walking to my car after work, buying groceries, eating dinner in restaurants with a book instead of company. The private investigator they'd hired had documented my solitude and presented it as evidence of decline rather than preference. I called Colonel Patricia Vance, Naval Academy classmate who'd gone JAG instead of aviation, built a career in military law that made her both feared and respected. Patricia, I need you, not as a friend, as my attorney. She came to my house that evening, read the petition at my kitchen table, got progressively angrier with each page. Die, this is elder abuse statutes weaponized. You're 42, highly competent, decorated officer. This won't hold up in court, but it'll be ugly and public. How public? Naval Times will cover it. Your command will be notified. It's designed to humiliate you into settling, giving them some control in exchange for dropping the suit. I can't settle. If I give an inch, Trevor takes everything. Patricia looked at me with eyes that had seen too many good people destroyed by family members who should have protected them. Then we fight, but it means exposing everything. His debts, his lies, all of it. You ready for that? I'd flown through storms that tried to kill me, brought men home from places where death waited certain and patient, earned $68 million through competence no one could dispute, built a life I was proud of even if I'd built it alone. Ready wasn't the question. Willing was. Yes, I'm ready. Married. The preliminary hearing happened in San Diego County Superior Court on a Thursday in February. Small courtroom, fluorescent lights, the smell of old wood and anxiety. I sat in dress blues, ribbons bright against navy fabric, silver oak leaves polished mirror bright, Patricia beside me in her service uniform, radiating competence and controlled fury. Trevor and Bethany sat across the aisle with their attorney, a man named Richard Cross, whose advertisements promised aggressive representation, and whose track record showed willingness to file anything if the retainer cleared. Olivia sat in the gallery, face pale, hands twisted together, looking younger than 19 and more lost than I'd seen her since Richard's funeral. Cross presented their case with theatrical concern, voice dripping sympathy for the decorated veteran who'd given so much she'd broken herself in service. Your Honor, Commander Castellano is a war hero. No one disputes that. But trauma changes people. She lives alone, has no social circle, makes questionable financial decisions that suggest she's not capable of managing the wealth she's accumulated. Patricia leaned forward, voice sharp. Questionable how? She owns multiple properties she doesn't visit. She has millions in accounts she doesn't touch. Classic signs of someone who doesn't understand what they have or how to use it properly. I raised my hand, quiet but firm. The judge, Barbara Morrison, 63 with gray hair, and eyes that had seen too many families destroy each other, nodded. Commander, you'll have your turn to testify. Your Honor, I'd like to address this now if I may. Judge Morrison studied me for a long moment, reading something in my posture that made her gesture forward. Proceed. I stood. Let every person in that courtroom see me, really see me, for perhaps the first time. My brother believes I own multiple properties I don't visit. Let me clarify. I own a condo in Norfolk I rent to junior officers at below market rates. I own a cabin in Montana I use for veteran retreats I personally fund. I own a home in San Diego where I live. These aren't signs of confusion. They're investments and charitable actions that serve purposes my brother apparently can't comprehend. Cross tried to interrupt. Patricia shut him down with a look that could freeze hydraulic fluid. And the millions in untouched accounts? I smiled, thin and cold. Those accounts are earning compounding interest in diversified index funds. It's called long-term wealth management, strategy taught in any basic financial literacy course. I learned it from advisors my brother apparently never consulted before gambling away his own future. Patricia handed the judge a document, thick with appendices and documentation. Your Honor, Commander Castellano's complete financial disclosure. Net worth, $68 million. All legally earned through patents on technology she invented, investments she managed personally, and 2 decades of disciplined financial planning. She is not only competent, she's more sophisticated than 99% of Americans her age. The courtroom went silent. Trevor's face drained to gray. Bethany's mouth opened and closed without sound. In the gallery, Olivia's eyes went wide with shock that would take weeks to process fully. Judge Morrison read through the disclosure, expression shifting from neutral to increasingly grim. Mr. Castellano, did you know your sister's actual net worth before filing this petition? Trevor stammered, words failing him for perhaps the first time in his charmed life. We thought, based on research, estimates were 15 to 20. So you filed conservatorship based on assumptions about assets you wanted to control, not actual concern for your sister's welfare. Your Honor, we can explain. I don't want explanations. Patricia handed over the second folder. Rachel Chen's investigation, every text message and meeting note and surveillance photo that proved Trevor's real motivations. This is documentation that Mr. Castellano has $1.3 million in gambling debts. Text messages discussing strategies to access Commander Castellano's wealth. Private investigator reports showing 6 months of research into her estate. Your Honor, this isn't a concerned family member. This is attempted theft disguised as compassion. Judge Morrison's face could have been carved from granite. She read in silence for 5 minutes that stretched eternal. the only sound the rustle of paper and someone's nervous breathing in the gallery. Mr. Castellano, this petition appears to be a financially motivated attempt to seize control of your sister's assets while she's legally competent and demonstrably capable. The evidence suggests fraud, possibly conspiracy, definitely abuse of legal process. Trevor's attorney tried to salvage something from the wreckage. Your Honor, family dynamics are complicated. Perhaps emotions ran high, but there's no evidence of actual criminal intent. The text messages refer to your client's sister as too damaged to manage money properly. They discuss using PTSD as grounds for incompetency. They detail strategies to establish patterns of concerning behavior. That's not family concern, counselor. That's premeditation. Judge Morrison closed the folder, met my eyes across the courtroom with something that looked almost like apology for the human race. This petition is dismissed, with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled. Commander Castellano, if you wish to pursue counterclaims for fraud, defamation, or emotional distress, that's your prerogative. This court will look favorably on any such filing. I stood. Thank you, Your Honor. We filed, walking out of the courtroom. Olivia ran to me in the hallway, tears streaming, words tumbling over themselves in apology and confusion. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Uncle Trevor told me you were struggling, and I believed him, and I should have asked you, should have trusted you. I held her, feeling her shake against my chest. It's not your fault, sweetheart. He manipulated both of us. That's what predators do. Trevor emerged from the courtroom looking like a man who'd watched his entire future collapse in the space of 20 minutes. He moved toward me, desperation naked on his face. Die, please. I made a mistake. I'm in trouble. I need help. You tried to have me declared incompetent. You lied to my daughter. You weaponized my trauma, my service, everything I sacrificed. And you did it for money you never earned and didn't deserve. I'm your brother. The past tense came easy, natural as breathing. You were my brother. Now you're just a case number. Bethany appeared. All pretense of sweetness burned away, leaving only rage and entitlement. You self-righteous bitch. You've had millions this whole time while we struggled. I looked at her, this woman who'd helped plan my destruction, and felt nothing but tired contempt. You struggled because Trevor gambles and you spend money you don't have on things you don't need. I offered help with his career, with budgeting, with anything real. He chose theft instead. That's not my fault, and it's definitely not my problem. I walked away, Patricia on one side, Olivia holding my other hand, leaving Trevor and Bethany in a courthouse hallway that smelled of floor wax and ruined lives. Outside, February sunshine cut through marine layer, warming the steps where we stood catching our breath. What happens now? Olivia asked, voice small and uncertain. Now I said we go home, we have dinner, and tomorrow we file countersuits that make sure your uncle learns some lessons he should have learned 30 years ago. Patricia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. Di, Marcus Reeves just texted. He heard about the hearing. He wants to know if you're ready to use the Catchmack Gulf evidence. I watched Trevor through the courthouse windows, seeing him argue with Bethany, watching everything he'd built on lies crumble around him. Thought about Cole Reeves, 29 forever, buried in Arlington, while Trevor climbed ranks on the foundation of that death. Tell Marcus yes, we use everything. No more silence, no more protecting people who don't deserve it. They called me Valkyrie 6 because I decided who lived and died in combat. But that was never true. I chose life. Every mission, every impossible flight, every decision in the space between heartbeats. I chose to bring them home. Trevor chose differently. He chose greed over honor, theft over honesty, destroying me over accepting that I'd succeeded where he'd failed. And now he'd learn what I'd known since that storm over Alaska 8 years ago. The Valkyrie doesn't just carry warriors to glory. She also knows when to let them fall. Patricia Vance's JAG office smelled of coffee gone cold, and the particular tension that comes from building cases designed to end careers. We met there 3 days after the conservatorship dismissal, surrounded by evidence folders stacked like ammunition. Margaret Liu, forensic accountant with steel gray hair and sharper instincts, spread spreadsheets across the conference table in patterns that told stories numbers shouldn't be able to tell. Trevor's debts are worse than what we presented in court. Margaret tapped a column of red figures that descended into catastrophe. He owes $340,000 to a loan shark operating out of Reno. Payment deadline is April 15th. If he doesn't deliver, there are credible threats of violence documented in text messages our investigator intercepted. Patricia leaned back, fingers steepled. That's not your problem, Di. It becomes my problem if he escalates. Desperate men don't surrender gracefully. They double down. Margaret continued through the financial autopsy. Credit cards maxed across 17 accounts, personal loans from fellow officers who believed they were helping a colleague through temporary hardship, a second mortgage on a house worth less than the combined debt secured against it. And Bethany's shopping had its own ecosystem of destruction: boutique accounts, jewelry on payment plans, a lease on a Mercedes she couldn't afford to fuel. The total painted a picture of two people living a life their income couldn't support, sustained by credit and delusion until both ran dry simultaneously. You have options. Patricia slid a legal pad across the table, 3 paths outlined in her precise handwriting: criminal charges for fraud, attempted theft by deception, identity theft based on him using your name to research Apex Aviation Holdings, civil lawsuit for defamation, emotional distress, legal fees that are currently approaching $200,000, or military justice, report to his chain of command for conduct unbecoming, and bring up Catchmack Gulf. The third option sat heaviest. Military justice meant ending Trevor's career permanently, stripping pension and benefits, potentially putting him in Leavenworth. Civil and criminal charges hurt, military disgrace destroyed. What's the smart play? Patricia met my eyes with the brutal honesty that had made her a friend worth keeping. Depends what you want, punishment or protection. I thought about Olivia, still processing the revelation of wealth she hadn't known existed, trying to reconcile the mother she thought struggled with the woman who owned millions. Thought about Cole Reeves buried at Arlington while Trevor collected promotions. Thought about the text messages calling me too damaged to manage my own life. I want him to understand what he tried to take. Not just money, my dignity, my competence, my relationship with my daughter. Everything that can't be deposited in a bank but matters infinitely more than what can. Then we go public, but carefully. Patricia pulled out another folder, this one thinner but somehow weightier. We coordinate with Marcus Reeves, use the Catchmack Gulf evidence as leverage, file everything simultaneously so Trevor can't prepare a defense. Criminal, civil, and military all at once. Overwhelming force. The military term felt appropriate. Wars were won through strategy and commitment of resources at decisive moments. Trevor had declared this war the day he filed conservatorship papers. Now he'd learn what overwhelming force actually meant. Do it, all of it, no holding back. Fed. Marcus Reeves arrived at my house that evening carrying a locked briefcase that looked like it had survived multiple deployments. We sat in my kitchen while February rain drummed against windows, the kind of Southern California storm that felt like punctuation from a universe paying attention. He placed a USB drive on the table between us. Small thing, plastic and metal, containing evidence that would shatter what remained of Trevor's career. This is the original mission recorder from Catchmack Gulf, the backup that survived when everything else burned. I've kept it in a safe deposit box for 8 years, Di. Couldn't let it go. Couldn't use it. Until now. Why now? Because Trevor tried to destroy you using the same playbook he used on Cole. Ignore safety. Override judgment. Manipulate people into thinking they're the problem when the real problem is command arrogance. I plugged the drive into my laptop. The file loaded with the scratchy quality of equipment pushed beyond operational limits. But the voices came through clear enough to break hearts. Static. Rotor noise. Timestamp. February 24th, 2017, 14:37 hours. Lieutenant Cole Reeves, voice steady but strained. Sir, we have a hydraulics warning light. Request permission to abort and return to base. Lieutenant Trevor Castellano, irritation sharp as glass. Negative. Mission clock is ticking. Continue to waypoint Charlie. Cole. Sir, the manual says we ground immediately for this malfunction. Trevor, I'm not asking for a goddamn debate, Lieutenant. I'm ordering you to fly. 10 minutes of rotor noise and increasing alarm indicators. Then Cole's voice again. Urgent now. Fear bleeding through training. Cole. Sir, hydraulics failing. Multiple warning lights. We need to land now. Trevor. Jesus Christ, Cole, stop being a pussy. Your sister flies through worse than this every week. Mechanical scream. Shouting. The sickening crunch of metal meeting ice at terminal velocity. Then silence so complete it hurt to hear. I sat staring at the screen long after the audio ended, feeling tears track cold down my face. Marcus looked away, giving me privacy for grief that was 8 years late, but no less devastating for the delay. He invoked you in those last seconds, compared Cole to you like bravery was the issue instead of his own negligence. Like if my brother was Diana Castellano, he'd have survived Trevor's incompetence through sheer force of will. My voice came out rough. Marcus, if this goes public, Trevor faces court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison time, everything destroyed. Good. 8 years ago, I let it go because I didn't want my parents reliving Cole's death in a trial. Didn't want Jennifer, his fiancée, dissected by defense attorneys. But Trevor forfeited mercy when he tried to destroy you. He doesn't get to hide behind my compassion anymore. We sat in silence, broken only by rain. Somewhere in San Diego, Trevor slept in a house mortgaged beyond reason, unaware that the foundation of his career had just cracked open. Use it. I'll testify. I'll bring every piece of evidence the Navy buried. And I'll make sure everyone knows. Cole Reeves died because my brother was desperate to prove himself, and your brother was too arrogant to admit he was wrong. March brought false spring, 70-degree days that felt like promises California couldn't keep. I walked into my office one morning to find Sophia Chen waiting, young face tight with distress that aged her a decade. "Commander, I need to report something." She twisted her cover in both hands, fabric creasing under pressure. "Admiral Castellano approached me yesterday, asked if you'd been inappropriate, wanted me to file harassment charges." The air temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Every detail came into focus with the hyperclarity of combat, the tremor in Sophia's voice, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, the calculation behind Trevor's desperation. "Tell me exactly what he said." Sophia pulled out her phone, hands shaking slightly. I recorded it. Knew something felt wrong, so I hit record before I responded. The audio quality was decent, good enough to hear Trevor's voice smooth and concerned, the kind of tone that could convince someone he cared about their welfare while destroying them. "Trevor, Lieutenant Chen, I need to talk to you about Commander Castellano. Has she been inappropriate with you? Showing favoritism, maybe making you uncomfortable?" Sophia, confused. "Sir, Commander Castellano has been a mentor. She's helped me immensely with flight training." "Trevor, I understand loyalty, but between us, Di has a history of boundary issues. If she's made you feel uncomfortable in any way, you can report it confidentially. I'll make sure you're protected from retaliation." Sophia, "Sir, Commander Castellano has never been anything but professional." Trevor, voice dropping lower, more intimate. "Lieutenant, think carefully about your career, your future. Commanders like Castellano, they're from a different era. They don't understand modern standards. If you support me on this, if you're willing to make a statement, I can ensure your advancement happens faster than you'd believe possible." The recording ended. Sophia looked up with eyes that held anger and something else. Disappointment, maybe, in authority figures who'd use their power like weapons. I told him I needed to leave, then came straight here. "Ma'am, what he's doing, it's not right. You've been nothing but supportive. You're the reason I stayed in the program when I wanted to quit. Thank you for recording this, and thank you for trusting me enough to report it." Is he going to get away with it? I thought about the USB drive in my safe, the conservatorship dismissal, the forensic accounting that proved Trevor's desperation. Not anymore. He's out of moves and doesn't know it yet. Sophia left. I called Patricia immediately, sent the recording, watched the counterattack take final shape. Aaron. We filed everything on a Monday in mid-March. Coordinated strikes across 3 jurisdictions. Overwhelming force applied to eliminate any possibility of defense or delay. Criminal charges with the San Diego District Attorney. Attempted fraud. Identity theft for using my name to access confidential financial information. Conspiracy to commit elder abuse, even though I was decades short of the legal definition. The DA, a former JAG officer named Rachel Morrison, took one look at the evidence and assigned her best prosecutor. Civil lawsuit filed in San Diego County Superior Court. $5 million in defamation damages for the conservatorship petition and its implications. $3 million for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Full restitution of legal fees currently totaling $180,000. Patricia's civil filing read like a prosecutor's closing argument, each paragraph building a case that Trevor had deliberately set out to destroy my reputation for financial gain. But the military justice filing hit hardest. Patricia coordinated with Marcus Reeves and his attorney, filed formal charges through Naval Special Warfare Command, conduct unbecoming an officer for the conservatorship fraud, bringing discredit upon the armed forces through gambling debts and lies, and the nuclear option, dereliction of duty resulting in death based on the Kachmak Gulf incident. That last charge carried specifications that read like an indictment: willful disregard of safety protocols, falsification of official reports, command negligence resulting in the death of Lieutenant Cole Reeves and injuries to 4 other service members. The evidence package attached to the military filing ran to 400 pages. Mission recorder transcript, maintenance log showing the helicopter flagged as unsafe, Trevor's authorization to fly anyway, Marcus Reeves's testimony as surviving SEAL team leader, forensic analysis of the crash proving mechanical failure that should have been prevented, 8 years of lies documented in official records Trevor had thought would stay buried. Admiral Raymond Shaw received the filing at 0800 hours Monday morning. By 1000, Trevor was summoned to his office. By noon, Trevor was suspended pending investigation. By 1500, base security escorted him from Naval Special Warfare Center with instructions not to return without express authorization. Patricia called me at 1730 with an update that sounded like distant artillery. Shaw read everything: the mission recorder, the conservatorship evidence, Sophia Chen's statement about witness tampering. Trevor's being charged under Article 32, military equivalent of a grand jury hearing. It's scheduled for April in Norfolk. How's he taking it? Badly. His attorney tried to negotiate. Shaw refused, said some things can't be negotiated when they're backed by recordings of dead men. Bethany cracked within a week. Her attorney, Michael Torres, was too competent to let her drown in Trevor's wreckage. He called Patricia Tuesday morning with an offer that stank of self-preservation. Mrs. Castellano wants to cooperate. Full testimony about the conservatorship planning, the gambling debts, everything, in exchange for immunity from criminal prosecution and a clean divorce. Patricia put him on speaker so I could hear. What does she have? Emails showing Trevor researched your assets obsessively for 6 months before filing conservatorship. Text messages detailing the whole strategy, including her suggestion to use PTSD as grounds for incompetency. Bank records proving Trevor forged your signature on information requests sent to Apex Aviation, and testimony that the conservatorship was her idea initially, but Trevor executed it because he needed money for gambling debts. What does she want? Immunity. Divorce filed immediately with Trevor agreeing to 0 spousal support. She pays $50,000 in restitution for her share of your legal fees, and her name stays out of the military proceedings entirely. Patricia muted the call, looked at me. Bethany walks free. Trevor faces everything alone. Do we take it? I thought about revenge and justice, the difference between destroying everyone involved and holding the right person accountable. Bethany was greedy and manipulative, but Trevor was the one who'd killed Cole Reeves. Trevor was the one who'd weaponized my trauma. Trevor was the one wearing a uniform he'd dishonored. Take it. I don't need Bethany in prison. I need Trevor facing what he did without anyone to hide behind. The Article 32 hearing happened in Norfolk on a Thursday in late April. Springtime in Virginia, turning the air soft and green, while inside a military courtroom we excavated bodies. Captain Jonathan Price presided, JAG officer with 30 years of service and eyes that had seen every variation of human failure dressed in uniform. Trevor sat at the defense table looking diminished somehow, like a photograph left in sunlight until the colors faded. His attorney, a civilian lawyer named David Kessler, who specialized in military defense, had the exhausted competence of someone who knew he was losing before the first witness testified. Patricia prosecuted wearing her service dress blues. Ribbons earned over 25 years, making a statement before she spoke a word. The charges read like Trevor's career in reverse, everything he'd built unraveling under the weight of what he'd hidden. The gallery filled with officers from Naval Special Warfare, journalists from Navy Times and San Diego Tribune, and in the back row, Marcus Reeves in dress uniform with his parents beside him, Cole's parents, 70-something years old, backs bent with 8 years of grief they were about to understand differently. First witness, Captain Marcus Reeves. He took the stand with the bearing of someone who'd carried dead brothers through snow and lived with the weight ever since. Patricia established his credentials, his presence during Operation Frozen Shield, his relationship to Lieutenant Cole Reeves. Then she played the recording. 4 minutes and 18 seconds of audio that painted a picture more damning than any testimony could have been. Cole requesting abort, Trevor refusing, Cole warning of system failure, Trevor invoking me as some kind of standard his brother couldn't meet. And then the crash that ended a life at 29 and created a lie Trevor rode for 8 years. When it ended, silence held the courtroom like a held breath. Captain Reeves, did you know about this recording before your brother's death? No, ma'am. The primary mission recorder was destroyed in the crash. This backup existed in classified files I didn't have access to until I filed a Freedom of Information request last year. Why file that request 8 years after your brother's death? Because I started hearing things about Admiral Castellano, how he treated subordinates, how he made decisions, and I realized Cole might not have been the first person endangered by Trevor Castellano's command style. I needed to know if my brother's death was truly an accident or something preventable. What did you find? That Lieutenant Castellano, as he was then, ignored maintenance protocols, overrode safety requests, and falsified his after-action report to hide his culpability. My brother died because Trevor Castellano cared more about his mission completion record than the lives of the men under his command. Kessler's cross-examination tried to establish that maintenance issues were ambiguous, that Trevor made a judgment call any officer might have made under pressure. But the mission recorder didn't lie, and Marcus didn't break. Your brother's request to abort was clear, the manual was clear. What was ambiguous? Kessler had no answer that didn't make things worse. Second witness, Lieutenant Sophia Chen. She testified about Trevor's approach, the implied threats, the promise of career advancement in exchange for false harassment allegations. Patricia introduced the recording Sophia had made, let Trevor's voice fill the courtroom with evidence of witness tampering and command abuse. Lieutenant Chen, why did you refuse Admiral Castellano's offer? Because Commander Castellano saved my career when I wanted to quit. She mentored me when senior officers said women didn't belong in combat aviation. She's the reason I'm still here. I wasn't going to betray that for a promotion I didn't earn. Third witness, Margaret Liu, forensic accountant. She walked the court through Trevor's finances with the clinical precision of an autopsy. Gambling debts detailed by date and casino, credit cards maxed in sequence as each credit limit was reached, loans taken against pension, against the house, against future income that would never materialize. In your professional opinion, what motivated Admiral Castellano to file for conservatorship of his sister? Desperation for money he couldn't access legally. Commander Castellano's assets represented a solution to debts that were threatening his physical safety and professional future. Could he have declared bankruptcy? Yes, but bankruptcy would have required disclosure to his chain of command and likely ended his military career. Conservatorship offered access to his sister's wealth while maintaining his own position and reputation. Fourth witness, Bethany Castellano, testifying under immunity agreement. She looked smaller on the stand. Expensive clothes somehow wrong on someone who'd been stripped of the power she'd tried to wield. Patricia took her through the timeline gently, establishing that Bethany had suggested conservatorship as a solution to their financial crisis. Why target Commander Castellano specifically? Because we knew she had money. Trevor had researched her patents, knew about Apex Aviation. We thought she had maybe 15 or 20 million. Turned out to be much more. But even at our estimates, it would have solved everything. Did you believe Commander Castellano was actually incompetent? No. But we convinced ourselves she was isolated, that she wasn't using the money anyway, that we'd be helping her by managing it. We lied to ourselves about what we were doing. What were you actually doing? Stealing. We were trying to steal from someone who'd never done anything but help when Trevor asked. Kessler declined to cross-examine. What could he ask that would make any of it better? Final witness, Commander Diana Castellano. I took the stand in dress blues with ribbons that told a story of 20 years in combat zones. Patricia walked me through my service record, establishing credibility before we got to the damage Trevor had inflicted. Commander, how did you feel when you learned your brother filed for conservatorship? Betrayed. Not by the filing itself, but by the lies underlying it. He told my daughter I was struggling financially. He told colleagues I showed signs of incompetence. He used my combat trauma as evidence I couldn't manage my own life. What hurt most? That he weaponized my service. Everything I sacrificed, everyone I saved, got twisted into proof I was damaged. Like surviving 20 years of combat made me less competent rather than more experienced. Patricia introduced the text messages between Trevor and Bethany. Let the court read about me being too damaged, too isolated, too broken to understand what I had. Do you feel you're incompetent to manage your financial affairs? I've managed $68 million in assets for 15 years through careful planning and professional advice. I'm one of the most financially sophisticated people Trevor knows, which is exactly why he tried to take control before I could stop him. Kessler's cross-examination attempted to establish that families help each other, that Trevor's concern might have been misguided but genuine. Commander, isn't it possible your brother truly believed you needed help? No. Because if he believed that, he would have called me, asked directly, offered assistance instead of filing legal papers designed to strip my autonomy. Concern doesn't forge signatures or lie to children. Theft does. What do you want from these proceedings? Accountability. I want my brother to understand that wearing a uniform means something. That command isn't just authority, it's responsibility. And when you fail that responsibility, when you get people killed and then cover it up, there are consequences that can't be avoided forever. What? Captain Price took 2 hours to review evidence before delivering his ruling. The courtroom stayed full, everyone understanding we were watching something more than individual judgment. This was the military confronting its own failure to catch Trevor's negligence 8 years earlier, to hold him accountable before his arrogance could compound. Based on the evidence presented, I find sufficient grounds for court-martial on all charges. Specifically, dereliction of duty resulting in death in the matter of the Katchmak Gulf incident, conduct unbecoming an officer related to the conservatorship fraud, and witness tampering regarding Lieutenant Chen. Admiral Castellano is hereby relieved of all duties pending court-martial. The court recommends confinement to base pending trial due to the severity of charges. Bail is set at $500,000. Trevor stood as security approached. For just a moment, his eyes found mine across the courtroom. I saw no defiance there, no anger, just the hollow recognition of a man who'd finally run out of places to hide. Outside, spring evening settled across Norfolk with the scent of magnolia and fresh-cut grass. Marcus Reeves waited on the courthouse steps with his parents, all three looking like they'd survived something that had been slowly killing them. Commander Castellano! Marcus's father extended a hand weathered by 60 years of Virginia farming. Thank you. We thought Cole's death was just terrible luck. Knowing the truth hurts, but it hurts less than the lie did. His mother, small and fierce, squeezed my arm. You brought our boy home once in that storm. Today you brought him justice. That matters. The press swarmed with questions I didn't answer. Patricia handled them with jag precision, giving just enough information to control the narrative without prejudicing the upcoming court-martial. Inside my rental car, I sat for a long moment watching the courthouse lights come on against gathering dark. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Watching the news, are you okay? I typed back, better than I've been in a long time. Love you. Her response came immediately. Love you too, Mom. Proud of you. Proud. The word hit differently coming from my daughter. Not proud of my money or my medals, but proud of the choice to hold Trevor accountable even when it meant destroying what remained of our family. Amit. The drive back to my hotel took 30 minutes through Norfolk traffic. I checked in, ordered room service, sat by the window watching ships move through the harbor with lights strung like promises against dark water. Patricia called at 2100 hours with updates that sounded like artillery coordinates. Trevor can't make bail. $500,000 is more than he can access, even with everything mortgaged. He's being held in the brig at Norfolk Naval Station pending trial. When's the court-martial? June. Judge wants it expedited given the evidence. Probably 3 weeks of proceedings, maybe less if Trevor takes a plea. Will he? I don't know. Kessler's good enough to know they're dead in the water, but Trevor's proud. He might force trial just to avoid the admission of guilt a plea requires. I thought about pride and what it cost when you cared more about appearances than truth. Trevor had spent his whole life building an image of competence on a foundation of lies. Admitting guilt meant accepting he was exactly what the evidence proved. Mediocre, dishonest, dangerous when given authority he hadn't earned. Let him decide. Either way, the outcome's the same. After we hung up, I called Marcus Reeves. He answered on the second ring, voice tired but somehow lighter. I wanted to thank you for testifying, for bringing the recording, for trusting me with it. You trusted me with your life when you flew into that storm die. This was just returning the favor. How are your parents holding up? They're processing. Dad keeps saying he wishes he'd pushed harder 8 years ago, asked more questions about the crash. I keep telling him there was no way to know. Trevor's lies were too well constructed. The best lies always are. They're built on enough truth that questioning them feels like paranoia. What happens now for you? Now I wait for the court-martial. Testify again if needed. And then, I don't know. Maybe finally let Cole rest. Knowing the truth means I can stop wondering if there was something I missed, some question I should have asked. It's finished. Outside my window, a destroyer glided past with running lights that painted the water in reds and greens. Somewhere in the brig, Trevor sat in a cell small enough to contain him physically, while his world collapsed in dimensions measured in career and reputation and freedom. I didn't feel victorious. Victory in combat was clear. Mission accomplished, everyone home safe. This felt different. This felt like I'd won the fight, but lost something I'd wanted my whole life. The family that saw me, really saw me. Not as a resource to exploit or a problem to manage, but as a person whose competence deserved respect and whose boundaries deserved honor. Trevor had never seen that person. He'd seen potential dollar signs and threats to his ego. And when he tried to take what wasn't his, he'd force me to teach him a lesson that would define the rest of his life. Some storms you fly through, others you have to become. I'd learned that in Alaska 8 years ago when I pulled 12 men from the ice. I was learning it again now, watching my brother face consequences for crimes he'd thought would stay hidden forever. The Valkyrie chooses who lives and who falls. But what they never mention in the myths is that sometimes the fallen chose their fate long before she arrived. Trevor had been falling since the day he authorized that flight in Katchmak Gulf. I just finally stopped trying to catch him. May passed in depositions in preparation for Trevor's court-martial. I flew back to San Diego, resumed duties at Naval Special Warfare Center, taught courses on combat aviation to officers who now looked at me differently. Not with pity or concern for the damaged veteran Trevor had tried to paint me as. With respect for someone who'd taken on her own brother and won through superior evidence and unshakable resolve. Sophia Chen requested a meeting in my office one afternoon, sunshine cutting through windows to paint her uniform in gold. Ma'am, I wanted to update you. I've been accepted to the Advanced Combat Aviation Program. Start in August. That's outstanding, Lieutenant. You've earned it. I learned something watching this whole situation with Admiral Castellano. She met my eyes with new confidence that hadn't been there 3 months ago. I learned that standing up for what's right matters more than career advancement. That protecting people who deserve protection is what leadership actually means. Where'd you learn that? From you, ma'am. The way you handled your brother. You could have destroyed him quietly, settled for the conservatorship dismissal and moved on. Instead, you made sure everyone knew what he did, made it public so other officers would think twice before trying the same thing. I never thought about it as teaching a lesson beyond Trevor. It was. Every female officer on this base watched you fight back, watched you refuse to be diminished. That matters more than you probably realize. After she left, I sat in my office thinking about legacy and what we leave behind when the missions end. Trevor's legacy would be disgrace and prison time. Mine, maybe, would be showing younger officers that competence and boundaries were not just acceptable, but required. Olivia came home for summer break in mid-May, 19 going on 40 after a semester that had forced her to grow up faster than either of us wanted. We sat on my back patio one evening with iced tea and the kind of comfortable silence that had been missing for years. Mom, can I ask you something about Uncle Trevor? Always. Did you ever think about forgiving him? Just letting it go? I thought about it. But forgiveness without accountability isn't mercy, it's enabling. Trevor needed to face what he'd done, or he'd just do it again to someone else. Do you hate him? Number one, I pity him. He spent his whole life competing with me when there was no competition. I was trying to survive, to serve, to make something meaningful. He saw that as a threat instead of inspiration. Will you visit him after the trial? I don't know yet. Ask me when the dust settles and I can think clearly. She leaned against my shoulder the way she had when she was small, before she learned to be independent to the point of isolation. I'm proud of you, Mom, not because you won, because you stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Being quiet almost destroyed me, sweetheart. Your uncle taught me that silence without strategy is just surrender dressed up as humility. June arrived with Trevor's court-martial scheduled for the second week. Patricia called the night before, opening arguments with final preparations that sounded like pre-flight checks. Trevor's pleading not guilty to all charges. Kessler's going to argue that the Catchmack Gulf incident was a judgment call made under pressure, not negligence, that the conservatorship came from genuine concern twisted by Bethany's manipulation, that the Sophia Chen contact was misunderstood, not witness tampering. Can he make any of that stick? Number. The evidence is overwhelming, but it means we go through a full trial instead of accepting a plea. 3 weeks of witnesses and testimony and media coverage. How's Trevor holding up? Kessler says he's maintaining innocence like a shield, convinced himself he did nothing wrong, that you're the vindictive one destroying him out of spite. I laughed, bitter and tired. Of course, accountability always looks like persecution to people who've never faced it. The court-martial would start tomorrow. Trevor would stand before a panel of his peers and answer for 8 years of lies built on a dead seal's grave. Justice delayed but not denied. Moving at the pace military bureaucracy demanded. I'd testify again. Marcus would testify again. The evidence would be presented again. And at the end, Trevor would learn what I'd known since that storm over Alaska. The Valkyrie doesn't choose who falls. She just witnesses the choice they already made and ensures everyone else sees it too. Outside, San Diego night settled warm and infinite. Somewhere in Norfolk, Trevor sat in a cell preparing for trial. And somewhere between us, Cole Reeves rested at Arlington, with a truth that had finally caught up to the lies that killed him. Tomorrow we'd begin again. Tonight, I allowed myself to feel the weight of what was coming, and the relief of knowing I'd carried this burden as far as I needed to. The rest belonged to justice. The court-martial lasted 18 days instead of the predicted 3 weeks. Trevor's defense collapsed under evidence that admitted no interpretation favorable to him. Mission recorder audio played in a Norfolk courtroom, while journalists filled notebooks and Marcus Reeves' parents held hands in the gallery, hearing their son's last words for the first time in 8 years. The panel of 5 officers deliberated for 6 hours before returning with verdicts that arrived like hammer blows. Guilty on all specifications of dereliction of duty resulting in death. Guilty of conduct unbecoming an officer. Guilty of attempted fraud through conservatorship manipulation. Guilty of witness tampering in the Sophia Chen matter. The sentencing hearing took place on a Thursday afternoon in late June, Virginia humidity turning the courtroom air thick enough to taste. Military Judge Captain Sarah Chen, no relation to Sophia, presided with the kind of gravity that comes from understanding careers end in rooms like this. Futures dissolved by words spoken into official record. Trevor stood at attention in service dress whites, stripped of all insignia except name and rank. They'd already removed his medals, his warfare pins, everything that marked him as someone who'd earned the uniform. What remained was just fabric, and a man who'd finally run out of lies. Admiral Trevor James Castellano, this court sentences you as follows. 8 years confinement at United States Disciplinary Barracks, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, for dereliction of duty resulting in death. Sentences on remaining charges to run concurrent, reduction in rank to ensign, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, dishonorable discharge from the United States Navy. The words landed with finality that left no room for appeal or mitigation. Trevor's face stayed blank, but his hands trembled slightly at his sides. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution of $180,000 to Commander Diana Castellano for legal fees incurred defending against your fraudulent conservatorship petition. The court notes that civil judgments remain pending and may be enforced following completion of your confinement. Judge Chen paused, looking at Trevor with something that might have been pity if pity could coexist with disgust. Mr. Castellano, you wore this uniform for 16 years. You commanded men in combat. You were trusted with lives. The evidence shows you betrayed that trust repeatedly, catastrophically, and then spent 8 years lying about it while building a career on a foundation of another man's death. This court can find no mitigating factors sufficient to reduce the sentence. You are remanded to custody immediately. Security personnel moved forward. Trevor's attorney Kessler stood but said nothing. What could he say that wouldn't make it worse? The judge allowed victim impact statements before Trevor was removed. Marcus Reeves approached the microphone first, parents flanking him like honor guard for the son they'd lost. My brother Cole was 29 when he died following your orders. He had Jennifer waiting to marry him. He wanted to teach history to high school students after his Navy service ended. You took that from him, from her, from all of us. This sentence doesn't bring Cole back, but it tells every service member, your life has value. Your safety matters. Leaders who treat you as expendable will answer for it eventually. Jennifer Whitmore, Cole's former fiancée, spoke next. She'd married someone else 5 years ago, moved to Oregon, built a life around the hole Cole's death had left, but her voice still broke when she spoke his name. I waited 3 years for Cole to come home. When he died, they told me it was mechanical failure, unavoidable accident. I believed that because I had to believe the Navy wouldn't waste lives carelessly. Learning the truth 8 years later doesn't change that Cole is gone. But it changes how I understand his death. He didn't die for his country. He died because one officer valued his promotion record more than human life. The courtroom absorbed her words in silence that felt like prayer. Then the judge looked at me. Commander Castellano, do you wish to make a statement? I stood, walked to the microphone, felt every eye in the room track my movement. Trevor watched me with expression I couldn't read. Something between defiance and devastation. Your Honor, Trevor Castellano is my brother. For 42 years we shared parents, childhood, the complicated bond that family creates. When he filed conservatorship papers trying to declare me incompetent, that bond didn't break. It revealed what it had always been. Conditional, transactional, built on his terms rather than mutual respect. I paused, gathering words that needed precision. Trevor asked me once why I never talked about my money, my achievements, my success. He thought it was shame. It wasn't. It was protection. I grew up watching our mother compare us constantly, watching him get praised for mediocrity while I needed perfection to earn notice. I learned early that my value to this family came from being invisible, from not threatening his ego or challenging the narrative that he was the golden child who could do no wrong. Trevor looked down. Something shifted in his posture, shoulders curving inward. So I hid. I hid my wealth, my patents, my entire self. And you know what that taught him? That I was hideable, erasable. Someone whose accomplishments didn't matter because they weren't acknowledged. I enabled this by teaching him through silence that I didn't count. But here's what I learned through all of this, Your Honor. Silence isn't humility. It's self-erasure. And I'm done erasing myself for anyone. The courtroom stayed quiet. Judge Chen nodded slowly. Are you asking for leniency? No, Your Honor. I'm saying I forgive him. But forgiveness doesn't eliminate consequences. It means I'm not carrying his weight anymore. That burden belongs to him now, and he needs to carry it long enough to understand what it actually weighs. Trevor's eyes met mine finally. I saw something there I hadn't seen before. Recognition, maybe. Understanding that I was offering him something more valuable than mercy. The chance to actually become the person he'd pretended to be for 16 years. Security escorted him from the courtroom. He didn't look back. The door closed with mechanical finality, and somewhere between that sound and the next breath, Trevor Castellano ceased to exist as anything except a cautionary tale about arrogance dressed in uniform. Outside, June evening settled across Norfolk, with cicadas singing in trees that had witnessed 100 years of sailors coming and going. Marcus Reeves found me on the courthouse steps, his parents already headed back to their hotel with the kind of exhaustion that comes from closure delayed too long. Thank you for what you said in there, about forgiveness and consequences. Cole would have appreciated the distinction. Your brother was a better man than mine ever tried to be. Maybe. But you're a better person than you needed to be. You could have destroyed Trevor quietly, taken the conservatorship dismissal, and walked away. Instead, you made sure everyone knew what happened to Cole. That takes courage different from flying through storms, or stubbornness dressed up as principal. He smiled, tired but genuine. Either way, the Reeves family owes you a debt we can't repay. You brought Cole home twice, once from that storm, and now from the lie that buried him. We shook hands. He walked away toward the parking lot where Jennifer waited to drive him somewhere for dinner, and the kind of conversation that happens after justice finally arrives. I stood alone on courthouse steps, watching Virginia fade to purple, and thinking about debts and obligations, about what we owe the living and what we owe the dead. My phone buzzed. Text from Olivia. Verdicts on the news, you okay? I typed back. Getting there. Love you. Love you too, Mom. Come home soon. Home. The word felt different now. Less like a place and more like a state of being I was still learning to inhabit without apology or explanation. July brought heat that made San Diego feel almost tropical, marine layer burning off by 9 each morning to reveal sky the color of promises. I'd taken 2 weeks leave after the court-martial, time spent doing nothing more strenuous than reading on my back patio and teaching Olivia to appreciate silence that came from peace rather than loneliness. The call from Apex Aviation came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was reviewing training schedules for the fall semester. James Brennan's name on caller ID made my pulse quicken slightly. CEO of a company I partially owned, calling my personal number instead of going through official channels. Commander Castellano, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, Mr. Brennan. What can I do for you? Actually, I'm calling to ask what we can do for you. The board met yesterday. We followed your situation with your brother closely, and we want to offer you something. I'm listening. Our Chief Innovation Officer, Dr. Patricia Hammond, is retiring in October after 15 years. The board voted unanimously to offer you the position. $850,000 annual salary, full creative control over research and development, equity package that would increase your stake to 25% over 5 years. And will fund any veteran program you want to create through the company foundation. The offer landed with impact that took several seconds to process. Executive leadership of a Fortune 500 defense contractor, authority to shape technology that would protect service members for decades, resources to build programs that actually mattered. Mr. Brennan, I'm still active duty. We can wait. Your retirement eligibility is September 1st, 3 months. We're prepared to hold the position until you're ready. Why me? You could hire someone with business school credentials, someone who spent their career in corporate leadership. We could, but patents don't lie. And neither does combat performance. You invented technology that saved lives. You flew missions everyone else said were impossible. And based on what I've seen in the news, you fight for what's right even when it costs you personally. That's the kind of leadership we need. Not someone who can maximize quarterly earnings, but someone who remembers that our products go into combat with real people inside them. I looked out my office window at helicopters practicing maneuvers over the training field. Young pilots learning skills that might save their lives someday. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. The offer stands whenever you're ready. After we hung up, I sat in silence thinking about trajectories and what happens when you stop flying toward destinations other people set and start charting courses based on coordinates that actually matter. Olivia came home for a long weekend in late July, summer semester break giving her 3 days away from Annapolis. We sat on the back patio after dinner, watching sunset paint the sky in shades that reminded me of cockpit views from 30,000 feet. Mom, can I ask you something serious? Always. She turned her glass in both hands, ice cubes clinking against condensation-slick surface. I've been angry at you my whole life, not just about Uncle Trevor's lies, but before that. Angry that you were gone so much when I was a kid. Angry that Dad died and you seemed fine. Angry that you didn't need anyone or anything except your career. I waited, letting her find the words at her own pace. But watching you in that courtroom, hearing what you said about silence and self-erasure, I realized something. You weren't fine. You were surviving. And I mistook competence for not caring, because I was too young to understand the difference. Tears tracked down her face. I reached over, took her hand. I made mistakes with you, sweetheart. I was so afraid of being like my mother, controlling and manipulative, that I gave you too much space. Didn't show you my struggles because I didn't want you worrying, but that just made me seem invulnerable when really I was just well defended. She squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you. Not because you won against Uncle Trevor, but because you stood up for yourself. Because you taught me something important. What's that? That being strong doesn't mean being silent. That you can be competent without being cold. That setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's survival. Where'd you learn that? From watching you refuse to be diminished. She wiped her eyes, smiled through tears. And I want to tell you something. I've been taking extra flight training courses at the academy. I want to be a pilot like you. I want my call sign to be Valkyrie 7 to honor you. My turn for tears. Sweetheart, you don't need my call sign. You'll earn your own, and it'll mean something unique to your service. I know, but I want people to know I'm Diana Castellano's daughter. I'm proud of that now. I want everyone else to be clear about it too. We sat in silence while stars emerged against darkening sky, 2 generations of women learning that strength could be inherited but had to be claimed individually, shaped by personal fire into something that bore your own stamp. September arrived with the administrative machinery of military retirement grinding toward inevitable conclusion. 20 years of service compressed into paperwork and medical evaluations, exit interviews, and final briefings. Admiral Shaw, Trevor's former commanding officer, requested a private meeting the week before my retirement ceremony. His office overlooked the harbor, windows framing ships that moved with purpose only the Navy understands. He stood when I entered, gestured to the chair across from his desk. Commander Castellano, thank you for coming. Sir, he sat, folded his hands, looked at me with expression that combined regret and respect in equal measure. I owe you an apology. I listened to your brother when he planted suggestions about your stability, your readiness to retire. I didn't question his motives because he was my deputy commander and I trusted him. That trust was misplaced, and it nearly cost you your career and reputation. Sir, you weren't the only one he fooled. Trevor spent 16 years building credibility through lies. You can't blame yourself for believing what everyone else believed. Generous of you. But it doesn't change the fact that I should have seen through him, should have recognized the signs of someone more interested in advancement than integrity. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer, slid it across polished wood. This is the keynote address for your retirement ceremony. I wrote it myself. Normally we have junior officers draft these things, but I wanted to do this personally. I hope it says what needs to be said about your service and what you've taught all of us about accountability. I scanned the speech. 2 pages, single-spaced, detailing missions and achievements, but also focusing on the Katchmak Gulf aftermath and what happened when I chose justice over family loyalty. It's honest, sir. Maybe more honest than most retirement ceremonies allow. You've earned honesty, and everyone attending has earned the truth about what kind of officer you are. Not just competent, but courageous enough to hold the line even when the person crossing it is blood. The retirement ceremony happened on a Friday afternoon in mid-September, Southern California delivering perfect weather like a parting gift. Naval Air Station North Island, parade ground polished and flags snapping in offshore breeze, 200 attendees in dress uniforms, families dotting the crowd with civilian colors, journalists from Navy Times and San Diego Tribune recording everything for official record. I stood at attention in service dress blues, ribbons bright against Navy fabric, 20 years of combat service translated into colored bars that told stories most people couldn't read. Olivia sat front row in her Naval Academy uniform, 19 years old, and somehow ageless, pride written across features that mirrored mine at that age. Admiral Shaw took the podium with presence that commanded attention without demanding it. Today, we retire Commander Diana Castellano, call sign Valkyrie 6. Her record speaks clearly. 287 combat missions, 41 lives saved directly, 14 military patents that currently protect soldiers in every theater where America operates. Navy Cross, Silver Star, 3 Bronze Stars with Valor Device. 20 years of service measured not in time, but in impact. He paused, letting those numbers settle. But statistics don't capture who Commander Castellano is. They don't show how many pilots she mentored when they wanted to quit. How many unsafe practices she reported even when it cost her politically. How many times she flew when everyone else said the mission was impossible. I'd been offered captain's rank twice, declined both times. Why? Because I wanted to fly, not command from behind a desk. Service over status, mission over promotion. That choice defines her character more than any medal. The audience shifted, sensing Shaw was building towards something beyond standard retirement platitudes. 6 months ago, this command learned something that shamed us. One of our own, a senior officer, had covered up negligence that resulted in a SEAL's death 8 years ago, had built his career on lies while the family of the man who died never knew the truth. And it was Commander Castellano who brought that truth forward, even though the officer in question was her own brother. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew about Trevor's court-martial, but hearing Shaw address it directly in official ceremony made it part of the institutional record. That took courage different from flying through enemy fire. It took moral courage to choose integrity over family loyalty, to accept the destruction of her last family tie, rather than protect someone who dishonored the uniform. Commander Castellano showed us that accountability matters more than blood, that wearing this uniform means something beyond rank and ribbon. Shaw's voice gained intensity. She was offered the chance to settle quietly, to let her brother's crimes stay buried in exchange for peace. She refused, not out of vengeance, but because she understood what we all need to remember. When we fail to hold our own accountable, we fail everyone who serves honorably. Every time we protect the guilty, we betray the innocent. The applause started slowly, then built like thunder. Officers stood, families joined them, the entire parade ground rising to its feet while Shaw stepped back and gestured me forward. I took the podium feeling the weight of 2 decades pressing against my shoulders, memories of every mission and every choice that brought me to this moment. Thank you, Admiral Shaw, for those words and for the integrity to acknowledge uncomfortable truths in official record. I looked out at faces watching me with attention that felt different from typical retirement ceremony politeness. 20 years ago, I took an oath to support and defend. I fulfilled that oath through combat missions in Iraq, Afghanistan, operations whose names remain classified. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to defend the most important person in the fight, myself. Silence deepened. Even the flags seemed to pause their snapping. I let people underestimate me because I thought humility meant hiddenness. Let my own brother believe I was incompetent because I didn't want to seem boastful. That silence nearly destroyed me, nearly cost me my daughter's trust, my financial autonomy, my reputation earned through 2 decades of service. So here's what I want to say to every woman in uniform, every person who feels like they have to shrink to fit, every service member who thinks staying quiet is the same as being professional. Your competence is not arrogance. Your boundaries are not cruelty. Your silence is not required. Several female officers in the audience sat straighter. Olivia's eyes shone with tears. I am a multimillionaire because I'm brilliant at aviation engineering. I am decorated because I flew into combat zones that killed others and brought people home anyway. I am retiring not because I'm tired, but because I have different battles to fight now. And I'm done apologizing for any of it. Applause erupted, louder than before, sustained longer. But I raised a hand, not finished. 3 weeks ago, I accepted a position as Chief Innovation Officer at Apex Aviation Systems. I'll use that platform to create the Valkyrie Initiative, a fully funded program to recruit, train, and mentor women in military aviation. My brother tried to steal my money, but he couldn't steal my purpose. And that's the real wealth, knowing what you're here to do, and doing it without permission or apology. Standing ovation. 3 minutes of applause that felt less like ceremony and more like acknowledgement that something had shifted, that a boundary had been drawn and defended successfully. When silence finally returned, I delivered the last lines I'd prepared. They called me Valkyrie 6, the chooser of the slain, but I never chose death. I chose life over and over, in storms over Alaska, in courtrooms in Virginia, in the decision to forgive my brother without excusing him, in choosing to build a legacy of empowerment rather than accepting a legacy of silence. I'm 42 years old. I have 73 million in assets earned through competence, not luck. I have a daughter who's becoming the pilot I hoped she'd be. And I have 40 women waiting to start training next month who will learn they don't need anyone's permission to be extraordinary. My voice softened but stayed clear. And I have a brother in Leavenworth who I might forgive completely someday if he earns it. But the thing I'm most proud of isn't the money or the medals or even the lives saved. It's this. I am no longer invisible. Not to others, and especially not to myself. The reception lasted 2 hours. Officers and families offering congratulations that felt genuine rather than obligatory. Sophia Chen found me near the refreshment table, her dress whites crisp and proud. "Ma'am, I start advanced combat training next month. I'm going to earn Valkyrie 7 if you'll permit the honor." "Lieutenant, that call sign belongs to my daughter. but there are 8 more numbers after that. Choose yours and make it mean something unique." She grinned. "Valkyrie 8 then, for the 8 years it took to get justice for Lieutenant Reeves." Perfect. Marcus Reeves appeared with his parents, all three looking like they'd found something in this ceremony they'd been missing at Cole's funeral. Closure with witnesses, maybe. Official acknowledgement that their son's death hadn't been forgotten or buried beneath convenient lies. "Commander, my mother wanted to give you something." Marcus's father handed me a small wooden box, hands weathered by farming but steady with purpose. Inside was a silver compass, military issue from World War II, engraved with initials I didn't recognize. That belonged to Cole's great-grandfather. Carried it through Normandy. "We want you to have it because you navigate by truth even when truth leads into storms." I closed the box, holding it carefully. "This is too much. This is family history." "You're family now." His mother's voice was quiet but absolute. "You brought our boy home when it mattered, and you brought him justice when it mattered more. That makes you family by choice, which is stronger than blood." October brought the launch of the Valkyrie Initiative's first recruiting class. 40 women selected from applicants across the country, ages 18 to 35, backgrounds ranging from military families to first-generation immigrants who'd never seen the inside of a cockpit. What unified them was hunger for something they'd been told wasn't available to people like them. I stood in the Apex Aviation training hangar, watching them file in, wearing flight suits provided by the program, faces showing mix of excitement and terror that reminded me of my own first day at flight school. Welcome to Valkyrie Initiative. I'm Diana Castellano, Chief Innovation Officer at Apex and founder of this program. For the next 18 months, we're going to teach you everything I learned in 20 years of combat aviation. How to fly when instruments fail. How to make decisions under pressure that kills hesitation. How to survive in career fields that weren't designed for you. I paused, making eye contact around the room. But more important than technical skills, we're going to teach you something the military still struggles with. That competence doesn't require permission. That your presence in a cockpit isn't a favor someone granted, it's a right you earned. That silence without strategy is just surrender wearing a humble face. Olivia sat in the front row, having taken leave from the academy to attend the opening week. Pride shone from her like reflected sunlight. Daughter seeing mother become something new while staying exactly who she'd always been. You're going to fail here. All of you, multiple times. You'll crash simulators, botch procedures, make decisions that would get people killed in actual combat. That's the point. Better to fail here, where failure is education, than fail in combat, where failure is tragedy. One woman raised her hand, late 20s, Pakistani heritage based on her name tag, confidence mixed with appropriate caution. "Ma'am, why did you create this program? You're already successful, wealthy, decorated. What do you get from teaching us?" "Legacy. I created wealth, but I can't take it with me. I earned medals, but they'll sit in a box after I die. This program is the only thing I can build that outlasts me. If I teach you, and you teach the next generation, and they teach the one after that, then maybe 50 years from now, there will be women in combat aviation who never had to fight the battles I fought, because we changed the system instead of just surviving it." The training began that afternoon. I watched them struggle and succeed and fail and try again, seeing in their determination echoes of the woman I'd been at 26 when I'd first believed I could fly through storms everyone else avoided. November brought a call I'd been expecting but dreading. Prison chaplain from Leavenworth, Father Michael Rodriguez. Voice gentle but direct. "Commander Castellano, your brother asked me to reach out. He'd like to see you if you're willing to visit." "How is he?" "Processing, if I can use that word. Working through what brought him here. He talks about you often, asks if I think you'll ever truly forgive him." "What do you tell him?" "That forgiveness can't be demanded. It's earned through changed behavior and genuine remorse over time." I stared out my office window at ships moving through San Diego Harbor, thinking about Trevor in a cell and what remained between us after everything that had burned. "Tell him I'll visit. Next week, if that works." The drive to Fort Leavenworth took me through Kansas prairie that stretched flat and honest under November sky. Patricia Vance rode beside me for support, neither of us speaking much as miles accumulated. The prison visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and regret. Trevor appeared after 10 minutes wearing khaki prison uniform that erased everything military about him except posture that stayed parade ground straight. He'd lost weight, hair graying faster than genetics alone explained, eyes holding something I'd never seen before, humility that looked almost like wisdom. We sat across from each other with reinforced glass between us, phones connecting our voices through wires that carried words without warmth. Di, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. He nodded, accepting that truth without defense. I've been working with Father Rodriguez, doing actual self-examination instead of the performance version where I pretended introspection while looking for new manipulation angles. And I realized something important. I waited. You didn't just teach me a lesson by holding me accountable. You gave me the first honest mirror I've looked into in 40 years. Everything before this was performance. Trevor the golden child, Trevor the officer, Trevor the admiral. None of it was real. This? He gestured at the visiting room, the uniform, the complete absence of pretense. This is the first time I've been an actual person. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it. He met my eyes steadily. I'm not asking for forgiveness I haven't earned. I'm not asking to be part of your life when I don't deserve that privilege. I'm just saying, what you did hurt, but it was necessary. And I'm grateful, even if grateful seems like the wrong word for what put me here. You killed a man through negligence and lived with that lie for 8 years. I know. And every night I dream about Cole Reeves, hear his voice asking permission to land, watch him die because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. He wiped his eyes with the back of one hand. The lie was destroying me slower than prison destroys. At least now I'm not carrying it anymore. I thought about freedom and what it meant, how confession could be liberation even when consequences remained brutal. I forgive you, Trevor, not because you've suffered enough. I forgive you because carrying anger is heavy and I'm done being weighed down by your choices. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Fair enough. We sat in silence for the remaining minutes of visiting time. When the guard announced time was up, Trevor stood slowly. For what it's worth, Di, I'm proud of you. Not in the condescending way where I took credit for your success. Actually proud. You're extraordinary, and you did it without anyone's help. That's worth celebrating. Thank you. He hung up the phone, walked back toward the prison interior without looking back. I watched him disappear through security doors, feeling something release in my chest that I hadn't known was still clenched tight. Patricia drove us back toward the airport through prairie that looked different somehow, lighter. How do you feel? Free. I spent so much energy being angry at him, then angry at myself for enabling him. Putting all of that down means I can use that energy for something that actually matters. June 2027. Washington, D.C. Summer wrapped the city in humidity that made marble monuments shimmer like mirages. The Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum had requested my presence for a special dedication. Women in Combat Aviation exhibit, featuring aircraft flown by pioneering women pilots from World War II through present day. The centerpiece was a Seahawk helicopter, same model I'd flown during Operation Frozen Shield, restored to pristine condition and suspended from the ceiling like it was still in flight. Valkyrie 6 stenciled across the nose in silver letters that caught light like captured starlight. Below it, a placard told the story. Commander Diana Castellano, USEN. Return, call sign Valkyrie 6, 287 combat missions, 41 lives saved, 14 military patents. In February 2017, Commander Castellano flew through Category Extreme storm conditions to extract 12 SEAL team members from Alaska's Aleutian Islands. Despite zero visibility, enemy fire, and multiple system failures, she completed the mission with no casualties. For this action, she received the Navy Cross. Valkyrie 6's legacy extends beyond individual heroism. Her patents in helicopter stabilization systems protect pilots globally. Her advocacy led to institutional changes in how the military addresses command negligence. Her Valkyrie initiative has trained 127 women in combat aviation, with 89% currently serving in military or civilian flight positions. Commander Castellano exemplifies the truth that heroism isn't just flying through storms. It's also demanding accountability, challenging systems that protect the powerful, and building legacies that outlast individual achievements. I stood before the exhibit with Olivia beside me, now 21, and commissioned as ensign after graduating the academy. Her own flight training progressed rapidly, natural talent meeting work ethic that would carry her far. The museum director, Dr. Sarah Chen, approached with a microphone. "Commander Castellano, we're ready whenever you are." I walked to the small stage they erected beneath the helicopter, looking out at 300 faces: military officers in dress uniforms, civilian aviation pioneers, young women who'd traveled from across the country because they'd heard about Valkyrie Initiative and wanted to see what was possible. "Thank you for this honor. For 42 years, I tried to stay invisible, thought that staying quiet was the same as staying humble, that not talking about my achievements meant I was focused on service rather than glory." I gestured at the helicopter suspended above us, at the placard that listed accomplishments I'd once hidden. But silence doesn't serve anyone except people who want to pretend women don't belong in combat aviation. Silence didn't help the women who came before me and definitely doesn't help those coming after. So I'm done being quiet. Applause rippled through the crowd. I'm a multimillionaire. I hold patents worth millions more. I've saved lives and built companies and held my own brother accountable when he tried to steal from me. And I'm not apologizing for any of it anymore. Because the opposite of arrogance isn't silence. The opposite of arrogance is honesty about what you've actually accomplished. Olivia stood in the front row, pride radiating from her like heat from sun-warmed metal. Beside her stood Sophia Chen, now lieutenant commander, and Marcus Reeves with his wife and children, representing his brother, who would always be 29. They called me Valkyrie 6 because I chose who lived and died in combat. But that was never true. I always chose life. Every mission, every impossible decision, every moment when protocol said abort, but people would die if I did. I chose life over safety, over protocol, over every instinct that said protect yourself instead of serving others. My voice softened, but stayed audible to the back of the room. And 2 years ago, I chose accountability over family peace by making sure my brother faced consequences for deaths he caused. That wasn't revenge. That was preventing future casualties by ensuring commanders understand you are responsible for the lives entrusted to you, and failure has consequences that can't be avoided forever. I looked at the helicopter that represented a career, a life, a choice to be visible instead of invisible. I'm 44 years old. I have a daughter who just got commissioned. I have $75 million in assets and a company that builds technology to keep service members safe. I have 127 women who've graduated from Valkyrie Initiative. And I've learned the most important lesson of all. Silence isn't humility. Silence is self-erasure. And every time we stay quiet about our competence, our boundaries, our worth, we teach the next generation that invisibility is the price of acceptance. The applause came slowly at first, then built like thunder until the entire hall stood. 300 people recognizing not just what I'd done, but what I represented. The choice to be seen, to be heard, to refuse erasure. The reception afterward brought faces from every era of my career. James Brennan announced that Apex's newest helicopter model would be named Valkyrie Class, production starting next year. Patricia Vance, now Brigadier General, shared that military academies were implementing new accountability protocols based on lessons from Trevor's court-martial. And Olivia, moving through the crowd with confidence that needed no permission, stopped beside me as the evening wound down. "Mom, I need to tell you something." The familiar phrase, but her tone was joy instead of concern. "Ryan and I are getting married. Next June, after I complete flight training. I want you to walk me down the aisle." Warmth bloomed in my chest, fierce and unexpected. "It would be my honor, sweetheart." She hugged me there in the museum, beneath the helicopter that had carried 12 men home through a storm, while other guests milled around us and the future stretched bright and certain. We stood together as the crowd thinned, mother and daughter, looking up at the aircraft that symbolized everything I'd been and everything I'd become. They called me Valkyrie 6, the chooser of the slain. But the truth was simpler and more difficult than any myth. I chose to be visible, chose to speak when speaking cost something, chose accountability over peace, chose legacy over safety. And in choosing visibility, I'd given permission to everyone watching. You don't need anyone's approval to take up space. You don't need to hide competence or apologize for success. You don't need to choose between being excellent and being loved, because anyone who requires you to diminish yourself isn't offering love worth accepting. My daughter understood that now. So did the 127 women who'd graduated from Valkyrie Initiative. So did the thousands who'd watched my brother's court-martial and learned that accountability applies equally regardless of rank or relationship. Trevor sat in Leavenworth, learning lessons that came too late to save his career, but not too late to save his soul. That was his journey. Mine was here, watching my daughter prepare for a wedding and a career, knowing I'd served with honor and saved lives and refused to be erased. The Valkyrie doesn't choose who falls. She witnesses the choices people make and ensures everyone sees the consequences with clear eyes and steady hands. That's the legacy I built. One woman at a time, one flight at a time, one moment of choosing visibility over silence, until the next generation didn't have to choose at all. They could just fly.